welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to the show, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. And I would like to bring up a topic on this show, this segment, that I feel is very important for us as people of African descent and in our community. It's a topic that I've heard discussed on social media, in the political climate of today, of what we as people of African descent need to do since at least since the civil rights movement. And that's how we must use, the topic is how we must use our economics. Where does economic lie in how we function as a people here in the African American community in America? And this has been a topic. Some people say education is the way to advance who we are as people of African descent. Some people say it's owning a business, which I kind of agree with. So I'm gonna bring some points and based on two books that I read. One is by a brother called Amos Wilson. He had a seminal work that came out back in the 90s, just before he passed, and it's called Black Economics, and Blueprints for Black America, based on Black economics. And another brother who many of you might have heard or maybe not, it's a Black economist, a very powerful speaker that I've seen a couple of times, and I've read some of his books. And he brings up some very good points when it comes to the power that we have and not actually are utilizing that power, and that's the economic power, accurately. And I always promote that in the African tradition, we always listen to our elders. And I called the elder, Brother Amos Wilson, who's no longer with us, but I will bring his ideas that he's put out to you. And also Dr. Claude Anderson, who is the other brother that I am going to base a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about, some of his theses and theories. And I hope it's informative, and I hope, like here in the Umoja Circle, we believe that only through dialogue can there be a shift in consciousness. And if what I talk to you and what I express today about the title of the show is Black Economics and its potential, will help in your dialogue, because we can't do this as individuals. We got to do it, as Dr. Claude Anderson taught me, we got to do it as, he used the term teamism. And what he meant by teamism, Dr. Anderson, in one of the lectures I saw, he said that we live in a world based on teamism. In order to succeed in this world, he says, every animal, every species of insect, every avian, every bird, and the animal could include the human animal also, work as a team in order to be successful. If you don't work as a team, your chances of survival, or that species' chances of survival, is very limited. We're losing species all the time in this world today, in the 21st century. And he said that the world functions as a team. All groups do that. And that's the basis of his thesis that I'm going to talk about on this first half of the show. The next half, the second part of this discussion, in the next show, I'm going to deal with the community. Teamwork comes from a knowledge of a common origin, common conditions that you're dealing with, and having a common objective. And all groups, all species, all people works as a team. I want to show us an image uh, that brings that point out. And and as a people, he says, if we don't work as a team, we lose by default. Now, you see an image of a species that's found in the Serengeti plains of Tanzania in Africa, and they're called wildebeests. And many of you are familiar, might have saw in some kind of documentary, wildebeest in the millions going across these plains to look for food. And they cross it in one direction in a particular season, and then another direction they go. They're massive. There's a whole lot of them. And I want to use this image to bring my point home about what it means to work as a team or work as no matter how big you might be as individual. Now, collectively, according to the Nielsen survey done in 2018, our collective buying power as people of African descent collectively in this country is 1.2 trillion with a T dollars. Okay? That's a massive amount of money. Just like what you see in this picture, there's a lot that represent basically these wildebeests. Okay? And every year we go and migrate to all these stores and places, and we spend this $1.2 trillion. This is yearly average buying power of we wildebeests. It's called the black community. But regrettably, of all the other groups in this country, we tend to work like those wildebeests, even though there seem to be a lot of them, and we have a lot of money. We go across our life looking for individuals, as you can see in that image right there on your screen. Each are focused on what they're consuming individually. When they go across the plains in their mass, they march, just like sometimes we march every now and then. But there's other animals that know about their migration, okay? And they work to feed themselves, just like other groups come into our community. And of those $1.2 trillion, we don't own a lot of the things that other groups own. We go across our wilderness and consume to consume their products. That's where our 1.2 trillion usually go. For example, we have a group that would come up to those wildebeests as they're going across the Serengeti plain, say wild dogs. They work as a pack. They're smaller. One dog is smaller than any one of those wildebeests. But one thing about the wildebeest, it'll leave its partner. If a pack of dogs go after one of them, or say one of the youngs, they'll run away. They won't coordinate or protect each other. They don't work as a group. They just work as a mass, all 1 millions of them, just like we just spend individually and consume to consume our own individual piece of what we want. We don't have no strategy. So that pack of dogs will easily bring down and take a feed on one of those wildebeests. Then will come the lions, and they work as a team. All other ethnic groups do that. And they feed off that $1.2 trillion, that we produce as wildebeests, but we don't have no strategies to protect that. And they also feed off the wildebeests. Then you have the hyenas who'll come. And then when they cross in the road or the river, you go find the crocodiles coordinate and come in and take what they want and feed and take their fill of the wildebeests. And that is what that metaphor of the wildebeest I wanted to start off when I talk about economics. Yeah, we have $1.2 trillion in spending wealth, but in spending, but that's based on working for some other groups, because we basically, that's based on income. Okay, so this is the premise. Teamism is what I'm going to be emphasizing uh, over and over again, that we got to start understanding that every other group feeds off us and gain wealth and gain access to that American dream. We tend to just go across our wilderness, every man for himself type of attitude, and still wondering why we are dependent on other groups for our jobs and our income. Uh, with that, I got some other points I want to put up on the screen for you to read along with me to understand that. Okay, just like I said earlier, any group of people who has control over important economic resource, along with the ability to make economic decisions that significantly impact the lives of others, permits those same people who own and control those resources the ability to wield considerable amount of power in a society. In other words, all these other groups, the hyena groups, the wild dog groups, who feed off our income, who we depend on for our jobs, that produces that income, has control over us. And we got to understand that. And as we go on, this next statement said, what is the definition of economics? You know, what am I talking about when I say about economics? It is the branch of our social system that is concerned with the production, consumption, and transfer of wealth. We do the consumption part, but where is our productive part? And how do we transfer ourselves between each other? For every dollar that goes through the black community, only 5 cents stays in. The other 95% is consumed by other groups. That's not good. Our production, that means our ownership, where's our factories, where the job creating companies that we are the generators of in the black community? No. In 1860, let me just bring this point before we go to the next slide there. In 1860, of all the black people, of the over 4 million or so that are black people, majority of them were slaves. Maybe 200,000 were in the North who had their own businesses or made some kind of income. Compared to the total population of white America at that time, only took in 1/2% of the total wealth of America. 1/2%. And back then, we were like 12, 13% of the population. Guess what? We're in the year 2019, we're 13, 14% of the population, comparable to now that we have a total population of over 330 million compared to what was back then in 1860s. But guess what? How much wealth do we take in as black people? 1/2%. Not much different than what was going on over 150, 60 years ago. So why are we still in that spot? Even though there's the civil rights movement, even though we had Black Wall Street and all these other economic possibilities, why are we still 1/2% of the wealth, that, what I mean, owning the wealth? Now we are producing, through income, 1.2 trillion, but we're doing the consumption part, most of that. We're buying and we're making other groups who are feeding off us, just like the hyenas and the wild dogs and the lions and their team are feeding off what we are only consuming. Now let's go on. I want to bring another point up. Next slide. See, economics is a system that controls the process by which we determine who get as much of what. when they get it, where they get it, and the area of income and education, housing and healthcare, and all these things that we need to as a people. And simply put, economic system in any society decides the basic actions of who gets what, not who gives. Okay, you create it through economics, the kind of economic system that you produce in a society, and that's important to understand. As we go on, in other words, the idea that the African American community can exercise effective power, political or otherwise, in today's society without simultaneously exercising economic power is a fantasy. And for any of those people who are saying that we need to have political power first, or we need to have education first. In fact, there was many of us remember in history, we were told about the talented 10th. That came from an essay written by the great scholar W.E.B. Du Bois in his book, Soul of Black Folks. I think that came out in 1904. And that chapter 7 was where they talked about the talented 10th, and in the form of they believed, or he believed, that you just educate the talented 10% of the black population. They go to these schools, and like Harvard, which he was one of the first to get his degree at Harvard, and then those 10% would come back into the community and do all these great things to uplift their people. But by the time he wrote another great book in the 1930s, he had a whole different opinion of the talented 10, because he understood that the kind of minds that came out of those schools were not the type of minds that went into the school in which they supported the black community. They became like the dominant group in mind. They even became worse in separating themselves from the masses of people, because they didn't want to be like that. And he was very disillusioned, and he started proposing what Dr. Anderson is thinking about. We have to work as a team. We got to use our collective wealth. and that's the idea he came in. He got so bad that he left and became an expat in Ghana, and where he lived until he died in the 1960s in Accra. Let's go on. So you see, education wasn't the thing. Now this picture is about a 5-story building. Now what does that got to do with economics? Well, it's a theory that was proposed that explains how we maintain our power. Okay, it's a metaphor. And each floor represents the structure should be vertical in how we maintain our community power. The first floor represents economics. That should be the foundation of any black community, just like it's the foundation of Italian community, Korean community, Chinese, Little Italy, all these communities that make up the American landscape, always as a team, as a group, individuals come together, common origin, common objectives, form unity. They will pool their wealth. And then from that foundation of economic power, where you build your factories, you build your businesses, and you started owning property and things like that, with the wealth that you gain, then the next level, which is on top of that, then you deal with the politics. The second floor represents the politics. You take the money that you're making economically, the foundation of your community, then you manipulate the politicians, okay? The third floor represents the criminal justice system, the courts. You use your money to tell the politician you will give your support economically, because they're always looking for financial support, or you will not work with them, you will not support them as a group, and then you tell them, once you get them to understand that you will not support them financially or economically at all, then you will have them deal with that third floor, the court system, the laws, so that it'll benefit your community. The fourth floor represents the communication system, owning of the newspapers and the radio stations and all these other aspects. Any invading army, one of the first places they go in order to have power over their conquered land is the communication system. Okay? So you have your foundation, your economic system, which then you use the money from that to control your political systems. The politics of your city, the politics of your state, the politics of the federal government. All these politicians who have an effect on your life and the policies they are going to do, all other groups do that. Every time you have a new group come to this country, during Vietnam, you had the Vietnamese coming in, because of what was going over in their country. What did they do? Even though they might take two to three families in an apartment, but each family member, even though they're a different group, culturally, they work together. Somebody might get a job as a cab driver. Another one might work as a chef or a dishwasher in a restaurant or laundromat, wherever. And then they would pool their wealth and then end up buying the building or buying the mini mall around that, in that area that they're living. Let's go back to that house. I want to continue on to that. Okay, the fourth floor with the communications. I was saying there's one point I want you to understand. You need to understand how to communicate your point of views. Where is our black newspapers, national? Where's our Telemundo? All right, in the media. In fact, we're having a debate, a national debate with all the presidential candidates in a couple of days here, the Democratic presidential candidate, and even though they're going to have NBC and these types of media outlets, MSNBC, Telemundo is also going to have somebody asking questions. Where's the black representation? BET is not going to be asking any of those presidential candidates any question pertaining to the black community. We have to have that. There's like 35,000 radio stations in America, okay? There's only about, at the most, 60 to 70 owned by the black community, black-owned radio station. That's pathetic. We don't have no way of expressing our point of view. Now, the top floor, that's where you're going to find education. Anybody who thinks, like I was talking about the talented 10, if you think that that should be at the bottom of that, and that's to support the black community, without economics, it's not going to work. It didn't work for the talented 10. According to W.E.B. Du Bois, by the 1930s, he realized that does not work. Yes, so what you see there is a basic structure, a vertical structure. The foundation of that structure is our economics, and we must understand that that is necessary for us to be a viable people. Economics is one of the most important things. We got to understand that $1.2 trillion that we consume does not mean anything. Any community that is economically depressed and functions as an underdeveloped enclave because we don't own our communities, okay? We used to have communities that we owned. Back in the 1920s and early teens, we did have Tulsa, We had Rosewood. We had communities in Richmond. The difference between a community and a a neighborhood. But when we integrated in the 60s, we were the only one who bought into that rugged individual aspect of capitalism in America. We gave up and stopped supporting our communities. See, a community is where you store your wealth. A community is where you build your wealth and build your businesses. It is where you maintain your cultural information. It is where you express the truth about your history. And there we could find that in Koreatown. We could find that in the Irish parts of Boston communities, or we could find that in Chinatown. We used to have our own black banks, our own black newspapers, but all that was given away for integrated into the larger population. I'm not saying that some people could not do that, but we must have a place in which we have our own wealth in order to deal with the political situation. If our wealth is not concentrated, we will never be able to have anything to do with the second floor. If we don't have any means of, without our wealth, we can never control what kind of information is disseminated with us in our media on the fourth floor. And forget the third floor. Do you think that if the Jewish community's young boys were pulled out of cars at car stops and constantly being shot over and over and over again, that the Jewish community would not use their community wealth to make a change, would not use their community wealth to go to those politicians on the second floor there and tell them, you better deal with what's going on with the police department or the courts on the third floor. And then we have our own type of school system that'll benefit our community. And we'll educate that. We used to send, as a group, sometimes the smartest kids in the neighborhood to go to college, with the aspect of them coming back to the community in the 30s and 40s. This is what I'm talking about. That's the structure. I'll continue this and talk more about the communities in the next show. But I want you to understand that without this sense of community, we're not going, you can march all you want. The people on the politicians are never going to listen to you. Because they know, just like the wildebeest, yeah, they can feed on you anytime they want to. And that's not good for us. So until next week, peace, hotep, bye-bye.